Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Beat Your Addiction with John Giordano. I'm your co-host, Scott Jones, and we want to thank everybody for joining us. And if you are watching us today, make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification button so you can get notified when we have other shows. And, of course, share this with your friends and let us know. You can reach John at johnjgiordano.com. That's the letter J in the middle. So it's johnjgiordano.com. You can get a hold of him that way. And let us know what you'd like to talk about when it comes to beating your addiction or anything else that has to do with a healthy lifestyle. I guess we could throw that out there, right, John?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And give us a like if you like it.
So I want to introduce, we have a great guest coming to us from Pittsburgh. And, we're pushing the high 80s today, and I'm sure you're not. So too bad.
Oh, we are. I can feel
you are?
already. Oh, yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, listen, this is Beth Gardner, who is a life coach, and she spends a lot of time working with families and different people, cancer survivors or cancer patients. I mean, the list goes on. We're going to talk more about that, but this is about a life coach who also deals with people who have loved ones or acquaintances or friends who are suffering from addiction. There are things that people need for themselves and all of that too. So I'm going to turn it over to John to talk to Beth right here on how to beat your addiction.
Okay, Scott. Hi, Beth.
Hi.
Beth, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself so we get a little background so they can understand where you're coming from and what's going on and so forth.
Sure. Throughout the course of my life, whether it was, through the family, through a number of sports that I participated in, and I started at a very young age in the second grade, through the dancing experience I had. And again, I danced for a company in Philadelphia. And then once I got into corporate America, when I retired from the sport of rowing, I always happened to cross paths with a number of addicts or substance abuse users is kind of what I prefer to call it, whether it be through alcoholism, prescription drugs, recreational drugs, pornography, any type of severe addiction or substance abuse use. I used to cross paths with them, and having grown up in a family where both parents were highly functional, highly intelligent, but they both struggled with their own form of alcohol abuse. I had, a father that was verbally abusive and physically, and then I have, a mother that struggled with her own coping mechanism in the marriage with her own addiction problem to wine. So growing up with it, as you know from experience, children aren't really aware at a young age that they're actually going through trauma. And once I left the house and went to college at Drexel University, it was then that I started to slowly notice I was having anxiety attacks and other problems associated with having come through so much traumatic experience in a family with addiction. So long story short, when I retired from the sport of rowing back in 1999, 1 year later, when I was training for the Philadelphia Marathon, I found out I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was stage 3 at that time. And so I went through 2 rounds of chemotherapy, a round of radiation. And once I was done with treatment, I found myself going through post-traumatic stress and more anxiety problems. And I wanted to get to the root of it. I wanted to find out what the root cause of all this anxiety, whether it was what I felt in college after growing up with, addiction in the family, or what was going on sort of with the anxiety I felt from treatment. And the bottom line was it all rooted back to being surrounded by addiction. People that struggled with substance abuse, prescription abuse, any type of addiction. That's where it stemmed from. But at the same token, please note that I do look at people in a sort of non-judgmental way. I don't believe anyone comes into this world wanting to have an addiction problem, something that runs in the family. People don't come into this world wanting bipolar, schizophrenia, borderline personality problems, severe depression. People don't come into this world wanting that. We come in very innocent. And so it pains me to see people struggle with any type of addiction. But I also needed to understand from my standpoint how I could heal from it once I realized that that was probably the root cause of me even getting cancer.
Well, stress causes autoimmune diseases and things of that nature, as you already know. And, you know, we always talk about the addict, but we never talk about the families and the significant others of addicts who are traumatized and who are angry, who are enablers or codependents. Maybe you want to get into what is codependency, because I know you wrote that in your blog and it was interesting.
Well, there are so many different definitions of codependency. And, you know, one of the first books, I was on my own mission to sort of understand more about addiction. I figured once I understood it, regardless of what type, it would help me to heal, right? So I did a lot of reading because I do love to read books. So I did read both of Melody's books here.
Yeah, Melody, yeah.
Right. And I've also read John Bradshaw's books. I have a lot of my books here. But so there are so many different definitions of codependency that I couldn't come down to one specific, but I did find ones that sort of worked for me. And Melody's one was one who has let another person's toxic behavior affect him or her, and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior, such as having OCD or anxiety. And she also says that codependents are victimized by the disease and the people. Codependents' life will plan their entire life around pleasing another person or another enabler. I mean, but there are a wide range of different definitions, but that's the one that resonated with me. Someone trying to
I usually say when a codependent is somebody, make it real simplistic, is how they put other people's life ahead of their own. And that means people that are sick, not being, you know, willing to help and things of that nature, but going to a point where people have to help themselves. And what codependents do is they do exactly what you said. They try to control the people, how they use, and then they enable them, and they try to fix them with money. They try to fix them with all kinds of different things, which of course doesn't work. And that's the trauma they go through, and they don't have a life, and they wind up getting sick. So what's interesting is my wife's father and mother had Alzheimer's and dementia, and we went to groups, and the main subject was also about the caretakers getting sick, and sicker than the people they were trying to help. And the same thing happens with addiction.
Right. I found that as well. And obviously cancer is because it does not run in my family. I did have breast cancer, but any form of cancer does not run in the DNA. So that was part of the reason why I was trying to dig deep, going to the Philadelphia Library. I still had access to the Drexel University Library, and of course doing some online research to find out why I had actually gotten cancer to begin with. And it really does stem from the anxiety and the constant trauma caused from being around addiction. And it wasn't just family based, it was later on in sports. I mean, it's everywhere. I could be working, you know, in an employment, a company, and I can, you know, codependents like myself are really good at now detecting addicts from a distance. I can smell them a mile away. But, you know, you can see, and all of a sudden you're working in an environment, and that can cause an effect on your performance. It's very traumatizing, and it triggers the old traumas.
Absolutely.
So,
A lot of companies have problems with it. You know, they sweep it under the carpet, and you know, it's not only a substance; it's its behaviors, and also then you get depression and you get anxiety from work. You know, and it goes on and on and on. And you know, we have an epidemic or pandemic in this country, and they're not looking at the epidemic with addiction, and people are dying like unbelievable amounts of people that are dying. 70,000 people, I think, died last year, and the way it's looking is that might even double this year. So this is why we do these podcasts, to bring all this out into the open, to show people that, hey, we better take a look at this and see what's going on. And the family members need to get help, and they need to go to therapy, and they need to go to Al-Anon or Naranon for addicts. Al-Anon is for alcoholics. And, but you have to do a therapy along with that also. In Al-Anon, you find a lot of people very angry. Okay. They can't understand why addicts do what they do. So it's very complicated, this disease. And as far as cancer goes and other diseases, I believe it stems in your gut, your microbiome, your microbiota there. And when you get really anxiety and you get all this other stuff, you're stressing the whole system out. And of course, that system is all integrated into everything else, and it causes disease. That's the way I know it.
Right. No,
So what do you think about that, Beth?
Yeah, definitely. You nailed a lot of good points on the head. It does cause disease. It can manifest in a wide variety of ways. And the unfortunate part is those people that are trying to care for substance abuse users or any form of addiction don't realize that a lot of their aches and pains or problems they're having, maybe they're having, joint problems, or they don't realize that a lot of that could just be stemming from the anxiety or what's going on in the gut. And it's also stemming from their environment. So I do believe it plays a big role. In fact, when I look back in my life, subconsciously, I would back away from anyone that I could sense was a substance abuse user, whether it was going to affect my performance at a job or in a competition or not, because I went into fear or flight mode because I could sense it. It has a very negative effect on me, and again, I do get anxiety from it. So,
well, what it does is it brings back those memories that you have from your early childhood and things like that. And what people don't understand is that addiction is also it's a brain dis-ease as well as a body dis-ease. And and what addicts do is they're selfish, they're self-centered, and it's all about them. Yeah. And their energy is so negative when they're in that mindset, is that it just permeates everything around them.
It does.
So it's quite stressful. And we talk about significant others. I had a woman, I never forget this. Her son was a heroin addict, and she would go into the hood to get heroin for him because she didn't want him to get arrested. Now, see if any of this makes sense. And then she would bring it back, and she would want him to use it in front of her or in the house, so she made sure he was okay. Well, that didn't work out too well for them, because what he did was he went in his bedroom, locked the door, shot up, and died in his bedroom. I mean, I could go on and tell you horrific stories of enabling and codependency, which is it doesn't help if a client goes to treatment and the family doesn't get help also. It's not a good idea, because you go right back into the family that's looking at you like you were, not like you're doing your best to change. And it's not a healthy environment for either one of them.
Correct.
Because it brings up all their trauma every time they see that person. The lies, exactly. The manipulations, the stealing, all the things that they've done, during their addiction. Right. So it's a lost population, significant others, and of all diseases, of cancer, of Alzheimer's, of all these things, of these caretakers that go beyond caretaking.
Right. Yeah. And part of my reasoning for starting the whole life coaching was not only was I doing, the reading of, Facing Codependency and all of John Bradshaw's books, Healing Chains That Bind You. So I was doing all this research, but at the same time, I was actively seeking out professionals, whether it was psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers in the area that I was living in, to find a safe sounding board, a non-judgmental sounding board where I could go with my tablet of questions, ask things that I was curious about, whether it was about an addict or about what I should be doing, in an effort to find healing. And I couldn't find anyone. All of the PhDs, those that had master degrees, social workers, they were all licensed to work with addicts, but nobody was licensed to work with somebody on the other side. And it just blew my mind, particularly as I'm in a city with world-renowned hospitals. So they're doing heart transplants, lung transplants. I mean, you name it, they're doing it. And there's just one area that they're not targeting on. And I'm working with professionals again that spent the time going to medical school or, getting their master's degree, and they don't have the tools to coach, to give me a roadmap, to confidentially listen to me, my questions, so that I can find healing. Instead, they're just talking about the addict. I'm like, I got it. I got the addict. I know the addict. Let's talk about me. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm paying you the money. So that's in essence why I've started this coaching business. I started researching again 2 years ago. I have access to Carnegie Mellon University, so I'm very old school in my research style. And I went into the library, and of course I was reading through a ton of books on addiction so that I could understand it. And all of the material that I've read and the information that I gathered, I actually wrote up on my blog that's on my website, just to actually give people documents to actually read from, proven facts. But also I wanted to start this coaching business to help people like myself, because I see them everywhere. I see the addict, but I also see the codependent. So I can see both dynamics, whether it's in any environment. I mean, I can walk into a grocery store and I can sense it.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. Since I'm a recovering addict, I have 36 years in recovery now, but I'm also an addict that has kids that are addicts. So I'm also a parent of this. And, I learned, like my son, early on, he would go and they were robbing houses. He was selling drugs. He was doing drugs and back and forth. And it was like unbelievable. So he got arrested, and he calls me up. He goes, "Dad, you got to get me out of jail." I says, "No, son, you have to stay there until you go to court." "How could you do that to me?" I said, "No, I didn't do that to you. You did that to you." And when we went to court, the judge says to me, because he knew me, because I, take my clients to court and I, speak for them. He says, "I'll remand them to your custody." I says, "Your Honor, would you please do me a favor? Would you put him on house arrest until he gets into a treatment center, because he is an addict?" And he says, "Absolutely." And my son hated me, cursed me. "How could you do that to me?" And, this is what goes on with parents of addicts. And I says, "Look, I love you. I don't want you." He said, "You love me? How could you love me to what you did?" And all this kind of stuff. Anyway, today, my son has 18 years in recovery. He's got integrity. He's got values. And he said to me one day, he said, "Dad, I really was angry with you when you treated me the way you did." He says, "But I'm glad you did, because that's what really helped me." And most people, the reason why they don't want to do that is because they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to die, and then they're going to blame themselves. So it's not about the addict. It's about themselves.
Right.
And that's what happens with codependency. It's not just, they want to help somebody. They're actually helping themselves, because they can't stand to see it anymore, and they're stressed out. They have anxiety, and they just want to get it off their plate.
Right. Right. And it's all the harder when you're not only just connected with people that, are genetics, but, there are people that cross my path that I know I've had sort of almost like a soul to soul sort of connection with. I'm not going to call them a twin flame or any of those household names, but, there are people that I've just resonated with, and to see them go through it, it's like, to me, it was just looking at someone committing a slow suicide. That's basically all it is. But also, I could see their gifts. Everyone comes into this world with a variety of different gifts that God gives us. And so to see people with these extraordinary gifts, I mean, if you think about just the music industry alone, the number of people that have extraordinary gifts to play and write music, but they struggle. They've got an addiction, extraordinary lawyers out there, medical doctors, surgeons, there are people out there with these, unbelievable gifts, but they're struggling with something.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, what do you think about some of this?
I think it's interesting. I want to ask you a question real quick, though, because I think it's kind of like an elephant in the room when we're talking about life coaching. And you probably know this more than I do. There's people out there that are giving life coaching a bad feel. People who just say, listen, I know this and I know that, and I feel like I'm going to be a life coach, and they're going to go out and do it. They haven't really put the time in and everything. So, I mean, have you come up against that where people are questioning what exactly, are you talking about here?
Sure. So that is a good question. And yes, I have. What I'm actually doing is my approach to all of this is, having done the research. I do have a BS in psychology. I did go through a life coaching credentials to obtain that license. But what I'm doing is I'm working with everyone, whether it's a group or individual, and I'm seeing each person individually as a snowflake. It's a method I used back in the investment industry when I was working there, even through the recession back in 2008. And the reason I look at everyone uniquely as a snowflake is because, in essence, they are. Everyone is unique as everyone else. So I am looking at them based on their personality, their experiences, how the addiction is affecting them, what's the family dynamics, in an effort to find for them a unique roadmap that will head toward the healing. Yes, you can read the books, great books out there. I mean, I've taken extensive notes, but I took notes to help create a roadmap for me, because that's why I was going to all these professionals. I'm like, I can easily coachable. I've been playing coach since, I was a kid. Just give me the roadmap. Okay, you told me to detach. How do you detach? I needed someone to explain to me, how do you detach? I don't get it. How do you let go? Okay, explain to me, how do you let go when you're just so deeply connected to them? That's a hard thing to do, is to let go, because essentially what you're doing is you're burying them.
I call it loving them to death.
Right. And, you have to create, sometimes you just have to completely block them from phones, from social media. You got to completely block them. So, but nobody was explaining those key factors. To essentially, first step you do is you create these boundaries. And having grown up in a very conservative Christian home, we weren't taught about boundaries. We were talking about giving and helping and loving my neighbors. My God, you give that you kill yourself. So I needed to learn how to set a boundary, because I'm a very strong person. I'm analytical. I can think on the spot on how to fix something, but sometimes I shouldn't be helping people. They need to figure it out on their own. So I'm teaching people on how to create that boundary so that they're creating a healing world within themselves, so they can start to heal and start the path to healing. So I work, like I said, with everyone, and I look at them as unique as snowflakes, because every family dynamic, whether it's, multiple kids and, multiple spouses, ex-wives, ex-husbands, you name it, any dynamic, that all attributes to that person's trauma and where they are at today.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What I was going to say is that, and a lot of family members say, look, it's not my problem, it's their problem. I'm not the addict, they're the addict. I don't need to go to therapy. I don't need to do anything. They need to fix themselves. And those are the ones that are as sick as the addict, because they're addicted to them.
Right.
And that's what family members don't understand. And even if they're angry and they don't want to ever talk to them again, they suffer, because they're waiting for the phone call to come in saying, well, he's dead, or he's in the hospital, or he's arrested. And it's just horrible what family members go through. And when I counsel them, I say, look, this is what I had to do. And, and even when I watched my son lay in a hospital bed and them putting charcoal down his throat because he OD'd, I was sitting there crying, blaming myself, even though I knew it wasn't my fault. And I knew that, I did everything I could to help him. Okay. I finally snapped out of it and realized, hey, wait a second. He made this choice. I can't stop him from doing what he's doing. I only can help him when he wants help. And that's what the message, I believe, is to all people. You only can help somebody when they want help.
Exactly.
And, that's it. I mean, you can't force anybody. Addicts are like a 3-minute ache, I call it. All right. You can't take them out after, and you can't take them out before. It's 3 minutes, either way you look at it. So that's what people got to learn to do. And it's hard, it's difficult, but it's harder just to keep giving and giving and giving and then watching them die anyway.
Right, right. But then there's that whole dynamic, and I will touch on the movie Prefontaine that I watched. It's about a track runner who actually breaks a lot of records back in the 70s, but his coach said one thing that resonated with me, particularly back when I was coaching rowing, is you cannot coach desire. You cannot coach height. You cannot coach a specific eye type. You cannot coach desire. You have to want it or not. So the people I work with have the desire to go down that path. And it is scary. It's dark because you literally have to pull those dark, deep-seated roots, some of which you're not even aware they're there because it's subconsciously been repressed for so many years. You have to do the work to pull those roots in order to do the healing. So that's definitely one thing I agree with, is they have to do it on their own. You have to allow them to hit rock bottom. And I've seen codependents hit rock bottom. So on the other side.
Let me say, first of all, respect to anybody who can row on the Schuylkill. So good for you. And I'm trying to picture John as a snowflake, and that's freaking me out right now.
I'm an Italian snowflake.
You're like a snowman is what you are. Yes. Italian snowflake. I love it. I want to touch on something very quickly, Beth, that you said towards the beginning of our conversation, the whole thing. You're talking about there was no professionals that were dedicated to this population. I guess the easiest way to explain it is they're the collateral damage of disease. The families and the friends and all this stuff, collateral damage of whether it's a physical malady, an addiction, or a mental health illness, or whatever it might be. There's so many people out there that are suffering, and there is nobody dedicated to that. What do you want to see happen, or what has to change? Because, let's go with the addict. Even if the addict goes and they get better and then they come home to a family that's still sick, maybe they're not addicted, but they're still sick or they're still suffering. That's not going to be helpful for the addict either. So what do you think needs to change?
Yeah, but you got family therapists. I don't want to, say there aren't anybody, because there are. There are family therapists that work with this stuff, okay? But the treatment centers, okay, they don't really get into it very deeply, a lot of treatment centers. And that's unfortunate. At our treatment center, we had once a week, families would come in and we would go over what the dynamics are, the boundaries that they need to take. If they don't, what the direction of all this would happen will be. And then we would bring in the client with the family. And then afterwards, we used to have family weekends, but it was too difficult. People couldn't fly in. And, so we stopped that, but we always had it every Tuesday where they can come to a meeting, whether they do it through Skype or whether they came in person. So there are people that do family therapy, but you're right, hardly anybody really gets into that, unfortunately.
That one-on-one, working with it, creating, itinerary, plans of what you're going to do each week and day by day. That's something that I needed. And thanks to being an athlete all my life, I already had that skill set to create plans for myself every day, healing plans week by week, month by month. But had I not had that skill set, I'd still be floundering. So that's one of the things that I go back to working with people and looking at them as the unique individual that they are and creating that plan for them. That's not what I could find. I even went to, it was recommended me, go to Al-Anon meetings, go to Al-Anon. Okay, I went, and I just felt like the energy in the room was just absolutely depressed. These people had been financially, spiritually, emotionally abused. And I thought at the end of the meeting, because you can't really, it's confidential meetings, so you can't ask questions. I thought at the end I would meet people that would be able to help me, and I couldn't. So out of curiosity, I played the addict, and I started to go to AA meetings. After going to a couple Al-Anon meetings and not getting what I needed, I went to AA meetings because I wanted to see what the environment was like. And doggone it, it was a lot more positive energy. Everyone was happy to have that weight lifted from their shoulder. They were talking about plans they were making for their lives. They were talking about the daily battles that they had to go through with the addiction, but they were also had a lot of gratitude So the support of everyone in the room, that they could call randomly if they felt they needed to talk to someone, but they never talked about the people that loved them. So the difference in not just the energy, but the conversation between the two groups was another, exclamation point for me to start this on my own, because again, I wasn't finding it, and I know there are people like myself.
Well, Al-Anon and Nar-Anon, what it is really based on is having people to show them that they're not alone, that
Right.
there are other people that are suffering that did the same things that they did, and they came to the same endings. So it has its place, but if you're looking for an in-depth, see, I'm a martial artist, so I'm into sports for over 60 years. And I know what structure is and discipline and setting all this stuff up, you see, but most people don't have what you and I have. And that's that discipline that we know what we need to do if we just give us the information. And see, but these people, they need to see that they're not alone, because what I found out in my experience, that family members believe that it's only happening to them. Oh, I know it's happening to other people, but this has only happened to me and my family. We don't understand. We're a good family. We gave them everything they wanted. We did everything for them. And look what we got. And, and that's the conversation that goes on in groups where other people say, yeah, we did the same thing, but look what it got us. So it's a way of connecting with people. And after the group, you could talk to people. It's just, no one really gives you a guide and what's going on with meetings and how to, approach things. And it's like you feel like you're lost in a sea, but it does help. But it's not just one shoe fits all. You have to go to therapy. You have to, Al-Anon and Nar-Anon are really good because you hear some really good stuff. Okay. And every meeting's different. So if you go to different meetings, you'll find different ways that people are dealing with stuff. So to me, it's a way of ingesting information from other people's experiences so I can apply it in my life. And that's what the self-help groups are all about. Okay. Seeing that, hey man, they're going through what I'm going through, and nobody's judging me here. I can really say what I want to say and not get judged. And we did a paper on this in the medical journal, actually, about how meetings raise dopamine in the brain, because people feel a sense of relief. I know I did, even though I didn't like the meetings and I thought they were baloney. I kept going and going and going and going and going. And they say, keep going, you'll see. And eventually, instead of looking through that lens of that negative lens that I looked at everything through, being an addict, I started to change the lens and look at the positive things that were going on. Because I know if, I go to a meeting, I could rip it apart and show you all the negative stuff that's going on there. But if I want to get help, I can also see the positive things. And that's the attitude of gratitude that you get when you go continuously to these meetings. So, that's my take on it anyway.
Well, and they are good, but at the same time, you can take all that information in, but if you're not using it, if you're not applying it to your life,
that's right.
You're not
Knowledge
healing.
is power. Without action is meaningless.
Exactly. So you can sit there and feel great in a meeting, but then go back into the work environment or whatever environment is that has it, and you don't feel good again. So you have to learn, like any other, it's like martial arts or any other, physical activity. You have to repeatedly learn what you need to do, the steps you need that are specific to you
in order to apply
it. Yeah. Otherwise, forget it. You're still not healing. And to go back to another question that was asked is, what happens when the addict who is now clean comes back into the environment? Part of me thinks, number one, why is the addict coming back in? Is it safe for them to come back in? Because they're now viewing life from a completely different lens. But one thing I did have learned, and I guess I've noticed, is the importance with addicts is, they need to continue on with their treatment and their groups and whatever, but those those skills that they had, communication skills that they've had over the years to manipulate other people to get whatever substance or whatever money or whatever thing that they want, unless they do the work, they're still using that. I've known people that have gotten clean, but they're still manipulating, and they're doing it in other ways.
Well, you're correct.
And not only that, but I'll go back to the non-addict side. And that's learned behavior on their end. So they could take what they've learned from the addict and go out into the world and act that way as well. So there's a learned behavior that goes back and forth that's so toxic for both sides, particularly if you're in a family dynamic. So the addict got clean and now they're back and they have a new lease on life. They got, rose-colored glasses on. Life is great. But now you've got these wounded individuals who are still used to that old way of communicating.
That's why they should not go back home right after treatment, okay? Or if they're not in treatment and just going to meetings, they should go to what is called a three-quarter way house, where there are other addicts and alcoholics that have structure.
Right.
Make sure it's a licensed three-quarter way house, so to make sure they're doing the right things that they're supposed to do, because there's some three-quarter way houses out there that are not good for people to go back to. And it takes about at least a year to 18 months for the beginning of all this to change, right, and where they can get strong enough. You look, you're using for 20 years and go to a 30-day program, that's not going to work. You see, even though you quit the drugs and the alcohol, and you got to change the behaviors that are ingrained in you for all these years. So, and most addicts have more than one addiction. A lot of the cocaine addicts have sex addiction. Alcoholics, they have other addictions. They have spending addiction, shopping addiction, gambling. The alcoholics gambling,
sugar,
and it goes on and on and on. And all those things are to medicate oneself from these feelings of pain and remorse and shame and guilt that they don't know how to deal with. And that's what recovery is about, teaching people how to deal with these things. And it takes time. But if you go right back into the same family that didn't get any help, they're going to be looking at your eyes. Oh, you look like you used today. Oh, where were you? And on and on and on, to where the addict says, you know what? It doesn't matter whether I use or not. I still get treated the same way. So they use that as an excuse to go get high, which is bullshit, plain English.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's always healthy for the addict to go back once they're clean. That was just one of my first thought is why would you go back? Start your own path, get an apartment, and then, over time, like you said, 18 months or so, start working back into it. Because this is, it's a disease, unfortunately. And a lot of it's triggered from DNA, and it takes time. It doesn't just happen. Even the highest IQs, they can't just turn it around.
No, and being alone is a bad place for addicts. You need to be in people that are like-minded. That's why they tell you can't go back to people, places, and things that when you were using, because they're all triggers for you. And people don't get that. Well, what am I going to do? They feel all alone. I felt that way. I felt like, I know these people 30, 40 years. I mean, what do you mean? I can't go, but I couldn't go back to them. And I had to get a new set of friends. And it wasn't easy because I was more introverted when it came to that. I'm an extrovert, but when it came to like socializing and stuff like that, early in recovery, I didn't want to do that. I didn't even want to go to these meetings. I said to myself, I wouldn't even get high with these kind of people. So, but I kept going. But it does take time, and you got to put yourself in like-minded people. And this way, when you're feeling down and you don't know what to do or where to go, you have somebody to bounce it off of that will understand what you're going through, because they're probably going or been going through the same thing.
Exactly. And if I could touch on, you keep talking about facilities, and one of the things I noticed when I was searching for my own help was I was like, is there a place I can go? Is there a resort or, think about the amount of millions of dollars, it may be even billions now in the United States, where you can go to an exotic location and get sober. Think about that. But there's nothing for people that are on the other side. I personally wanted to take 2 weeks off of work and just go somewhere. where I could get the same type of help. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
That's
it's
a good
only
point.
fair. It's only fair. So that's my other viewpoint on this is there's money to be made on for the people on the other side. Why aren't there facilities? I mean, the marketing that goes on, just social media alone for addicts,
I'll give you another
places
reason.
they can go. You know what I mean?
I'll give you another reason. I went to I had a health, we had a booth at a health fair, and, it was about addiction. Nobody wanted to come to the booth because nobody wanted to show that they maybe have an addiction or maybe they had somebody. I mean, it's amazing what people don't understand. People don't want anybody to know that their family, because it's all about family secrets.
Right.
So getting a bunch of people together to do this, very difficult.
Right. Yep.
What do you
Family
think, Scott?
Secrets, John Bradshaw. There we go.
Oh, okay. It's a good book. It is a good book.
Yeah.
Listen, we've actually come down to towards the end of the show, so I figure we should probably wrap up with some final thoughts.
Sure.
And certainly, Beth, if you could let us know how people can get a hold of you. Do you have a website?
I do. My website is selfreliant.info. I like information, but it's info, selfreliant.info. And there you can find my blogs that I referred to earlier, where there's a ton of research. You can find my contact information. You can learn all about my career path and athletic path and really what brought me to where I am today. I mean, I'm thankful for this pandemic because I had done all the research and I had planned to launch it, but there's no way while working still in the investment industry at the fast speed that I was going to be able to take this off, take it. So yeah, I'm thankful for the pandemic. It's given me the opportunity.
Well, you lived it also with your family. So it's not that you're just reading books, because reading books, it's not the same of living it. I promise.
Right. It's just like going back to, a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist. And because I have walked the walk and also walked the walk of cancer, I can therefore help people all the more, It's like I used to row and I'm able to coach. So I'm able to explain to people, effective rowing skills. So yeah,
well,
definitely.
I guess we're at the end.
Yeah, Beth, I want to thank you for your time. And
you.
certainly thank you for the job that you're doing in helping people that otherwise don't get the same attention. So we appreciate that.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for having me.
And if you guys out there like what we're saying and what we're doing, please like us, follow us, give us a thumb up if you like. And if you want to know more about what I do, you can go to Giordano.com. You can see my books that I've written, and if you're interested in that, you can get them on Amazon. And Scott?
That'll wrap.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. For John Giordano, I'm Scott Jones, thanking our guest, Beth Gardner. And for all of you out there, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye-bye.